in the heart of Afghanistan. A community exists whose stories require us to confront the harsh realities of religious persecution. Imagine living in constant fear, where even during the most sacred of rituals, people you once played with as children hurl bricks at your family. Over the past generation, nearly 250,000 Afghan Hindus and Sikhs have been forced to flee their ancestral homeland as their rights, dignity, and safety have been slowly eroded. In a nation once known for the harmonious coexistence among Hindus, Sikhs, and Muslims, the bonds of friendship and unity have been utterly destroyed. The peaceful picnics and celebrations of national events have faded into memory.
The civil war that erupted in 1992 with the arrival of Mujahideen parties in Kabul marked the biggest turning point. It plunged the country into chaos and spelled disaster for non-Muslim communities. They faced social deprivation, political neglect, and religious intimidation, pushing them to the margins of society.
The findings of one survey conducted by PR in 2019 showed that 81.6% of Hindus and Sikhs believed Afghanistan was heading in the wrong direction, 4x the national average. 53.1% said they feared an encounter with the national police, and a staggering 97% said they fear for the safety of themselves and their families. Beyond the fear, unemployment, poverty, and a lack of educational opportunities plagued Hindu and Sikh communities. For many, these challenges were insurmountable barriers to continuing to live in Afghanistan.
در شهر قندهار پیش براتون عرض کردم که 400 خانواده این بازار کابل از سر تا به آخرش این تمام از این بود. این دکانا این خانه بازار شکاپور از سر تا به آخر از این بود. شهر نو 70% از این بود. ولی در تمام شهر قندهار اینمی یک خانه ماست یکی من ماندم. من حیران هستم که چطور زنده ماندم، چطور انسان هستم که ما اینقدر رنج و زحمت کشیدم، اینقدر شکنجه دیدم.
PR's research uncovered a history of suppression dating back to the 1880s during Abdul Rahman Khan's reign. Now, Afghanistan's long-established religious minorities are approaching extinction. PR's investigation highlights where the spike occurred in targeted attacks on Sikhs and Hindus from 2018 to 2020, perpetrated by the Islamic State in Khorasan province ISKP. These attacks claimed dozens of lives and instilled fear among these vulnerable communities. Mana Warsing remembers a mullah's ominous words: "If the neighbor of a mosque is a Hindu, the prayers of all Muslims in that mosque will not be accepted."
One of the darkest moments was the Gurudwara attack in Kabul on March 25, 2020, where 25 Sikh civilians lost their lives, including women and children. This event triggered a mass exodus. Our research in the tragedy overload gathered many perspectives on what led to the atrocities and resulting mass exodus. History always tells a story. Hatred like this doesn't just happen. Turning people against their neighbors takes a long time and follows patterns of escalation and rhetoric by 1,000 tiny cuts. A legal protection lost here, an influential sermon there, a bad court ruling. We recognize the patterns of oppression in other historical struggles. A Hindu must always give up his seat on a bus to a Muslim. A Sikh must first greet a Muslim first if they pass in the street. Sikhs and Hindus are disallowed from holding public office, owning businesses, or serving in the military. Then, crackdowns on free speech and attacks on journalists and researchers, giving a voice to the oppressed.
The telltale signs of intolerance, segregation, oppression, and violence are recognizable and even predictable if you know what to look for. This means their consequences can be averted by learning from past mistakes and learning to recognize the warnings early.
In just 30 years, communities who had lived in Afghanistan for countless generations now found themselves strangers in their own land. Deep roots stretching back 1,000 years and more were erased to the point that many young Muslims heckled them to return to India, believing that they must be recent arrivals.
These stories are not just tales of suffering. They are a record of history. They are the echoes of a once vibrant community whose traditions, love, faith, and patriotism have been threatened and, in many cases, lost forever. The best way we can honor those experiences, however, is to learn from the pain so that we are not doomed to repeat our past mistakes.
هندوان چې د هر مراسم کې د مسلمانانو مراسم ته راتله مسلمانان د هغوی مراسم ته تله ډېره ښه وخت خلکو سره تیر کړي دي اوس هم خلک یادوي چې دا هندوان ډېره ښه خلک وو او موږ سره ښې شپې ورځې تیر کړي دي او دغلته بیچارهګان اوسېده دغه یې مندر و نور همدغه هلته پراته وو سرنګ درمسالي و همدلته نور دا ډېرې نومونې ما نه یېرده خو ټولې مې لیدلي دي دلته میرسنګ و پرکاش و جرسنګ و دا خلکې مې ټول لیدلی ده مسلمانانو سره په یو کاسه کې ډوډۍ خوړل هېڅ کې منګر پکې نه و دغسې کارونه کول نو بیچارهګان.
Originally, people hoping to remain in Afghanistan fled to the outskirts of their cities, then to Kabul in the hopes they blend into a bigger, more diverse city. This only provided a brief respite from persecution, however, and eventually they migrated abroad to Pakistan, India, and Europe where they could find protection.
By documenting these stories, we gain insight into the consequences of hatred and fear. The stories inspire people to take initial action, but without research and rigorous analysis, they will have no idea what choices to make.
But this story is far from over. Many of these people are still living and displaced in strange lands, and then you see what is happening in Pakistan.
With everything going on in the region at the moment, the Pakistani government's targeted expulsion of nearly 1.7 million Afghan refugees is getting lost in the noise. What almost nobody is talking about is what will happen to nearly 250,000 Hindus and Sikhs if they are forced to return to a country now ruled by the Taliban. It will be a catastrophe. Many would rather die.
Policymakers and NGOs need to act to empower and safeguard these communities. Deals must be brokered and political pressure must be put on governments like Pakistan to reverse measures that will put people in danger for their lives. This is a perfect example of why we focus so much on minority groups in our research. The plight of nearly 250,000 people is almost entirely unknown to much of the world because it has been lost among the various other conflicts that have plagued this region for the past half-century. But these people are still displaced, searching for new homes, trying to survive new oppressive regimes, struggling to find a voice.
Whole cities and villages where people have lived for 1,000 years are empty, sitting abandoned, vandalized, or wholly destroyed. The few who remain are there, sometimes in secret, because they see it as their duty to keep a small candle lit to honor God in various historical holy sites.